Hello everyone, my name is Omar, and in this video I will be talking about Azure Bicep and will provide you some examples on how I've been using it to deploy my infrastructure. So let's take a look. So what is Azure Bicep? Azure Bicep is a new declarative language for deploying Azure resources, meaning this is a product from Microsoft to deploy resources in Azure only. So you cannot use it in AWS or GCP or any other cloud provider. Also, this is not a standard programming language for writing applications either. So that's it. How Bicep compares with ARM templates. So ARM templates, or Azure Resource Manager templates, are JSON files that represent Azure resources in which the syntax contains functions and methods to perform complex operations. In other words, you use ARM templates to deploy your infrastructure resources in Azure. One common complaint about ARM templates is that it's very challenging to write and interpret them due to complex syntax. And here's where Bicep comes to play, and it addresses this issue with a more straightforward approach to language syntax compared to ARM templates, in which the final output could be pretty verbose or pretty long and complex. The benefits for using Bicep is that, well, number one, simple syntax and syntax improvements. When you compare Bicep against ARM templates, Bicep files are more concise and easier to read. And here is an example of an ARM template versus Bicep templates, which you can see the difference in how many lines it takes an ARM template when you compare it with Bicep. And at the end of the day, they both deploy exactly the same thing. Number two, the support. Bicep also supports all resource types and API versions right from the get-go, including all preview and GA versions for Azure services. Modularity. You can break your Bicep code into manageable parts by using modules. Also, there's no cost. You don't have to pay for premium capabilities, and it's also supported by Microsoft support. I will include the Microsoft official documentation in case you want to learn more about Bicep in the description. Now, you might be asking, why create a new language instead of using an existing one like ARM templates? And I know I said at the beginning that Bicep is a new declarative language, but think of Bicep as a revision to the existing ARM template language rather than a new language. Syntax has changed for sure, but the core functionality and runtime remains the same. Also, one thing I want to mention is that if you already know how to code with Terraform and you're happy with Terraform, there's no reason to switch to Bicep. Microsoft will keep supporting Terraform, and they are committed to make sure Terraform on Azure is the best it can be. But if you are familiar with Terraform syntax and you want to learn Bicep, you will quickly learn Bicep as the syntax is very similar. One difference between Terraform and Bicep is that there is no state or state files to manage with Bicep. All state is stored in Azure, so users can collaborate and have confidence their updates are handled as expected. Isn't that nice? That's it. I have to say that I've been using Bicep for about 9 months with one of the clients that I work with, and to be honest with you, I am enjoying it. I love it. I feel that it's very easy to write code, and I think it's a great tool. Anyway, that's it. In this video, I will show you some tips of how I am using Bicep to deploy my infrastructure, and I will give you some examples, hoping that it will be helpful tips for you whenever you need to code your infrastructure. As far as the requirements, you will need to have installed Visual Studio Code, install also the Bicep, and also I would recommend the extension for Azure Bicep in Visual Studio Code. And with that said, let's get started. Okay, so before we start, I wanted to mention that you can always come to Google, and in this case, I will look for a Bicep template for a storage account. And here you have a template. I use this for reference on the settings I want to include in my template. For example, take a look at the parameters that says required to deploy this template. You will see this in action when I go over the demo. Now let's switch gears to my Visual Studio Code, and I wanted to show you how you can create a template file in Bicep. I will go up here and we'll create a file called storageaccount.bicep. You can name it the way you want. And if you have all the biceps bits installed and the extension in Visual Studio Code, you should see that Visual Studio Code recognizes the bicep language right in this corner. First thing I will type is resource. I will give it a name. This could be any name you want, but look at the intelligence from now on, from this moment. I can start typing, for example, storage and hit tab, and it will automatically type everything for me. I give it space and then tab, and that's all I do. Look, when I specify the required properties, it will bring me all the required properties without me having to type all of this. Remember when I said to pay attention at the required properties in the template? Now let's take a look at some of them. Some of them are just strings that you can give them any name, and this is how you would provide the details. There are some others like the SKU name and kind, where the template it expects a specific string. But no worries, you can just hit space and the intelligence will give you all the available options, so you can select it from there. Now, instead of leaving the template like this, let's add some parameters to make the template a little bit more dynamic, if you will. For that, I will come up here and start adding the word param. I will add one for the storage account name, the location, the SKU, and the kind. And in this case, all of them are strings. Now, I will call the parameters on each of the lines down here. I will also add a comment here to specify that here is where the creation of my resource starts. And just like that, if you need to convert this template into an ARM template, all you have to do is type Azure Bicep build, -- file, and give the name of the file. Now let's compare both files so you can see how long they are. Wow, look at that. Bicep only has roughly 14 lines, and the ARM template is 37 lines. You can also take any ARM template you have and convert it to Bicep by running AC Bicep decompile, -- file, and the name of your JSON file, and the Bicep will do the best it can do to interpret your file and then convert it to Bicep. Now, in our case, we don't need the ARM template, so I will go ahead and delete it. Now, let's talk about Bicep modules. I wanted to show you how to use and consume modules with Bicep. Modules are great because it allows you to organize your deployments. A module is just a Bicep file that is deployed from another Bicep file. With modules, you improve the readability of your Bicep files by encapsulating complex details of your deployment. And you can also reuse modules for different deployments. You can call the modules from a container registry. Let's say that you have your template stored in a Azure container registry, like the storage account the template that I had. Well, you can call them from there. I haven't tried that approach yet, so it's a little bit out of scope for this video, but I just wanted to let you know that you can do that as well. Bicep modules are converted into a single ARM template or Azure Resource Manager template with something called nested template. So I will go here and create a folder called modules, and I will put my storage account template in there. I will create another file called main.bicep. This will be the Bicep file I will use to call the modules, and I will move it to my root folder just like this. Let's start by adding a comment on where my resources start getting created. I like to do that so I can easily find them later on, because this could be a lot of resources that I will be calling. Okay, so I will start typing module, give it a name, and point it to where my module is. I will hit space and tab, and look, it brings me all the parameters I had on my template. You can put your parameters here, but also you can use a parameters ARM template to pass your parameters. And this is useful if you are deploying to multiple environments, and it works perfectly. So what I will do is that I will create a parameters file. You can go to Google and type parameters for Bicep, and here I have it. I'll go ahead and create a parameters file here. The name of on the module, it will be the name of the deployment, if you will. You will see it in action when we deploy our templates. The rest, I will repeat the same steps we did earlier and put the parameters, but this time I will add a description like this. Now, for location parameter, you can pass in the resource group location by adding resource group parentheses dot location. That will give you the location, whatever it is in that resource group that you are deploying to. Oh, and I will also need a resource group parameter. I want to show you about how to scope this resource creation to a specific resource group. So here's how you do it. After you create a parameter, you will add a scope on the resource module like this. Now, after you log into your Azure account, and notice that in this case, I created a resource group beforehand, you can run AC deployment group validate -- resource -- group, and then you give it the name of your resource group. In my case, it's Bicep demo dev rg -- template - file, and the name of your main bicep file. In my case, it's main.bicep. And then you can pass the parameters by -- parameters. In my case, it's going to be parameters - dev.json to validate and if everything is okay. You can also run with what if, and this will tell you exactly what resources will be created. This is similar to the Terraform plan, if you're familiar with Terraform. Same command, just hit the up arrow, just replace the validate for the what if, and I think it should be parameters file here. Oops, no, it should be parameters and not parameters - file. So my bad. And yep, there it is. So now that I validated, I will run the same command, but we'll change the what if for create. Let's take a look in Azure under the resource group, deployments. Here it is, and there you go. Here's my storage account created. Now let's say we have an existing storage account and we need a way to create a container inside an existing storage account. You can always come to the storage account template, or you can create another template just like this. Let's go to my modules folder and we will create another bicep file called blobcontainer.bicep. If I need to understand a little bit more about the properties that will be required for the template, I always go to the Microsoft documentation and read about the properties that this template will need. For the blob services, I need to specify this one first. So I will start creating the blob services. In this case, the name will be just default. And on top, I will make a reference to my storage account, to my existing storage account. And this will look like I'm creating another resource, but with something different instead. I will pass a parameter for the storage account name like we did earlier. And here in the blob services container, I will pass something called parent and reference the parent of this child resource, which it will be the name I gave after resource. Whose child is this? And at this point, you should know me. I want to be as clear as possible, so I will add a comment here on the resources we are creating. Now I will go ahead and create my container. This time it will be the blob services containers resource type, and I will pass a parameter for my blob container. Again, the parent will be the blob services for this child resource. I will save it. Now let's go ahead at the main.bicep file and call the module from there. And let's create the parameters for that blob container. And we will also add a dependency on the main resource. It makes sense that in order to create a container inside the storage account needs to be created first. Otherwise, we'll try to create both at the same time and it will fail when it comes to the blob container part. It's gonna try to look for where is the storage account, and if it doesn't exist just yet, then it will fail. And now let's add the parameters in the parameters file. Let's save all and deploy. Now let's check it out in Azure, and here you see the blob container is now have been created. The next thing I wanted to show you is how to create loops. For example, I had to create for my client around 18 databases inside a SQL server. Yikes. Well, in our case, we will do it with storage accounts because of course. Now for storage accounts, the name needs to be unique all across Azure. So a way to create something more dynamic is by creating a parameter that will create a random unique name. So let's go ahead and create a parameter called solution, like this. You can name it the way you want. And then create a variable to reference that name, like this. Let's say that your storage account needs to start with a specific naming convention. In fact, let's do something more interesting. We'll create another parameter to reference the environment, if it's dev, prod, and in the variable, we'll use the value from that other parameter and another variable when constructing the naming convention. So when my storage account gets created, it will start with SA on the name, and then it will reference the solution variable, and it will add the name of the environment at the end. I hope that makes sense. You will see it in action in just a few. And now let's go ahead and create a resource. In fact, let me just copy the storage account template and we'll give it another name so you can see the difference. Let's go to a template and we will add this logic. Open the square brackets after the equal sign and we will add for item or for I in range. Then we're going to open parentheses 0,3. Then we're going to put a column. And on the name, remember we need to reference whatever the name will be. So just put the name in between quotes, like $, open curly brackets, and after the name of the variable, you will add a $, I, and curly brackets I. Okay? This will create multiple storage accounts, and you will see it in action. So also, let's go ahead and add an output, but this time it will be an array since the template is iterating multiple times to create those storage accounts. And we will include the same logic, but we want the name of the storage account whenever it gets created, like this. And we also want the resource ID. And just look at the IntelliSense, which it helps a lot. I'm just hitting tab here, guys. Let's go back to the main Bicep file and add the module. Let's also add the output like this and deploy it. Also notice it's asking me for an environment because of the parameter I added earlier. So in this case, I will select dev and see the results. Let's take a look in Azure to see my deployment. And here we have the storage accounts. One last thing I wanted to show you is, let's say that you're deploying an app service plan or SQL databases, but they will have a different SKUs and different tiers in other environments. So you can do something like an environment configuration map, and you can define, depending on where you are deploying, you can define different SKUs. And this is just an example because you can do it with parameters files as well. I'm just giving you an idea on another possible ways to handle a deployment. So I will create an app service plan as an example. So let me create the template first. You already saw this, so I will fast forward and creating the template. Once I create it, I will go to my main template and define the SKU, tier, name, and capacity for each environment like this. Now let me go back to my app service plan template, and here is how I will define this. I will say, I want the app service plan SKU.name for the name. Same for the tier, app service plan SKU.tier. Now I will go ahead and call the module. It's not bringing the parameter that I was expecting. So let me get back to the template and define the parameter, which in this case, it will be an object. There we go. Now we define the parameters, and for the SKU, we will say something like environment configuration map. We open the brackets, the square brackets, and we say environment type dot app service plan. Now we refer to the variable that we created for the configuration map, app service plan dot SKU, to call what we defined earlier. And to finalize this, I'll create the missing parameter for the ASP name and also define it in our parameters file. Let's go ahead and deploy this now. Let's check in Azure to see, and there you have it, folks. In this tutorial, we'll learn how to create Bicep templates. We'll learn how to convert them from Bicep to ARM templates and vice versa. We also learn how to create modules and consume them, and how to create loops, create child resources depending on existing resources, and how to create an environment configuration maps. Wow, certainly we cover a lot in this video, so at this point, I hope you already started to get more comfortable with Azure Bicep. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed and found useful the part 1 of this tutorial. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for notifications every time I upload a new content. And in the next video, I will give you a demo on how to deploy Bicep in a pipeline, and we'll be deploying an entire infrastructure, Bicep end to end, using the concepts we learned in this video. If you're starting to work with DevOps or any other cloud positions in your career, this is about practice. It's about keep learning and keep yourself motivated. And mastery will come with practice and being consistent. See you in the next time.